this sales style is not traditional, but I think it's the way of the future to engage. It's hard to get access to these guys and set up lunches with new customers and do the old traditional cold calling. We're seeing you have to really identify the right customer and then go deep within that one account.
This is the Medical Sales Accelerator Podcast, featuring tips from top performers, delivered like a conversation over cocktails. Listen in to glean wisdom from the best of the best and accelerate your results for years to come. Now, here are your hosts, Zed Williamson and Clark Wiederhold.
Welcome to the Medical Sales Accelerator Podcast. This podcast is for you if you care about growth. You want to see your numbers grow, your sales, your market, and market share. You've got technology that helps patients. Let's make more connections.
My name is Clark Wiederhold. I'm Chief Sales Officer at Trackable Med, formerly Trackable Lead Generation. But prior to my time with Trackable Med, I spent the last decade plus in the medical tech space.
And I'm Zed Williamson, CEO of Trackable Med. For the last 9 years, we've worked alongside and with the commercial teams in the MedTech space, driving patient demand.
Commoditization with pricing pressure, fear of losing business as you're on the other side of your town, other side of your state, or multiple states that you're covering. These are all stresses that are put on any of your businesses over time.
And that's why we're going to talk to someone who's had a lot of success in practice development. Today, our guest is Ben Bourterie, Regional Sales Director at Aerin Medical. He brings a proven track record of success as a sales rep and sales manager. During his career, Ben has spent time with Fortune 500, startup organizations alike, where he's won 7 President's Clubs while creating markets for disruptive technology in multiple specialties. He lives in Lafayette, Louisiana with his wife and young family.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Let's jump right in. One thing that you've done really well with in your career is building walls around business and creating value. You've done a lot of that through practice development and building businesses. When did you realize that was a competitive advantage for you?
Pretty early on, whenever, working for companies that had a market development role built into the sales organization. When you use the sales style, when you use the resources appropriately, it helps build barriers to entry, and it allows your brand, your company to really insulate themselves from competition getting in and providing a new product or service to your customer base. Market development for me, it's a good way to educate patients, to increase awareness, and also help increase utilization for a customer that's clinically bought in on your product. Undoubtedly, like you mentioned, market agitation. I think the fun starts whenever practice development activities begin to agitate the market, and you see those laggard physicians or those next round physicians get interested in your product or your services.
Man, so many different directions to take that. But let's start with that market agitation piece. You've got your early adopters, right? Before that, you've got your innovators. How has market or practice development allowed you to continue to, one, drive patient education, but more importantly, agitate the other physicians in that marketplace that weren't ready to make a move?
Yeah, I think it, starts off with proper targeting. You going into a market, especially as a startup company, you need to make sure you're targeting the right physician who is an innovator or a physician that's, that likes to get on technology early, but also who doesn't mind reinvesting back in their own practice. You need that first round of physician, not only to utilize your product in a consistent way, one that you can learn from because there's going to be some bumps in the road along the way, but also someone who's willing to reinvest back in their practice to help, disrupt the market in a sense that's going to eventually lead to mainstream utilization over time.
I know you've done this at a very high level. What's really interesting, and I'd love to hear more about, is how do you coach your current team and teams that you've had in the past to identify those opportunities in the marketplace, especially when it's maybe a less tenured rep that has, doesn't have the experience you have?
It starts with, a proper targeting guys who are clinically understand the impact that your procedure has on his patients. They also understand how they're getting reimbursed for this procedure. So they understand the economic impact that it has on their patients and their practice, and really creating a strategy. I see a lot of companies, a lot of reps that offer some form of market development, but they don't necessarily have a plan for them to achieve success. And I believe in a staged approach, one that you start working within a practice. How do you engage patients who may be inactive within their database and then moving towards, ways to attract new patients to bring into their practice.
So, you imagine you have this rep who hears what you said about, let's dig into your current patient database. And they're nervous about doing it because they're afraid their customer is going to say, well, I've already seen those patients. I would have treated them if they were candidates. What do you say to a rep who has that kind of trepidation, fear?
Yeah, well, in my career, what I've noticed is that, no matter which specialty you're currently working in, patients don't always go see a physician for a problem. I think the patients get just used to dealing with issues and may go for, acute problem that they're currently having. So my experience is that, through asking the right questions, through engaging patients through emails and different forms of media, I think you're able to uncover issues and offer some non-invasive solutions to problems that patients really think that, is just a normal way of living, and they've adapted to that current situation.
Yeah, it's a really good point. That's where we see massive benefit from what you mentioned earlier about practices investing back into themselves. And what I've noticed in us working with reps and managers throughout the MedTech space, sometimes there's a little fear about how much do they invest? I don't know if there was a point in your career where at some point you thought a certain dollar amount was high and now you think that's not high at all. Do you see that where someone goes, well, no, I can't ask them to spend $1,000. And then, you learn a little bit more and now you're going, oh, I can't ask them to spend 10,000. And you learn a little bit more and it's like, hey, they should spend 100.
Price is always an issue. Price is the first thing that comes up. But, I think it's always important, as I talked about a stage approach, you don't always have to start big. If you start small with something that's more internal, relevant to their current patients, as long as you take the time, and that's on you as a consultant to show the ROI each step along the way, keep them motivated to reinvesting back into that part of their practice. And I think that's where a lot of times the ball gets dropped, and a lot of time where the marketing ends for that particular procedure is when you don't follow up, you don't sit down, do a business review and really show them, the return that they got on their initial investment, and maybe a strategy and the next stage or the next level of marketing that they can introduce to generate continued interest.
I'm curious, we're called the Medical Sales Accelerator Podcast. And what we find is the people who attack the market the way you do, they see that acceleration as opposed to that just gradual, slow increase of a user. You see those big jumps. Is there a specific scenario where you witnessed a massive acceleration of use because of some approach that you brought to the customer?
Actually, on several different occasions. Yeah, it's definitely helped create not only a deep incline, but also a very consistent and predictable increase as well over time. And in our business, it's all about, consistent growth quarter over quarter. And as salespeople, a lot of us kind of sit back and always trying to plan a quarter ahead and figure out who our target's going to be so that we can forecast appropriately to our managers. Having this style of selling with market development and having that always in back of my mind, to me, it allowed me to be, I think, more predictable into what's going to happen in quarters to come. I like a fast pace. I like to, keep my head down at the same time and work hard, but always have a strategy and providing the right resources for the right customers. Everybody has different needs. Everybody runs their business a different way. So you got to tailor your message, tailor your strategies, specific to that customer.
What about internally in your organizations you've been in? Did you surprise many people with that accelerated growth? Was it ever a scenario where they kind of blamed luck, or they blamed the region, or maybe, well, it's because your customers? Was it hard for people to wrap their head around that it was the outcome of a predictable plan put in place?
There's always a little bit of luck maybe sometimes throughout the process. I don't want to say it's all been, because of my strategy. Look, I've been probably more fortunate than most people in our industry. I've been very lucky to be surrounded by some of the best minds and creative minds, and I think in MedTech. And, to say that I've, figured this out on my own would be a complete lie. This sales style is not traditional, but I think it's the way of the future to engage customers and offer the ability to go deep with the customer and get more out of each individual customer. Because what I've noticed, pretty much every market, it's hard to get access to these guys and set up lunches with new customers and do the old traditional cold calling. For us, we're seeing you have to really identify the right customer and then go deep within that one account.
Walk through some of the competitive advantages that it brings you and it brings your team when this is executed. Why take the extra time to do this? Why do more than talk about the features and benefits of, the widget you have? What does it bring you?
One, it's allowed me to build relationships deeper than I've ever thought I'd be able to build with a customer. I think you quickly become a consultant and a friend and someone they trust. Even if you don't have the best product, I think a lot of times it makes it very difficult for someone else to come in and partner with these groups.
I think it's safe to say that anybody listening to this podcast that's in any type of business development situation, we can all agree we've got to have those pieces, and we're striving to get there in some form or fashion. Even more so today in today's environment. How are you talking and how is your team talking to those physicians and their practices about the way they think through their business at the end of the day?
Well, I think what we're doing and what we're having some success with, and a lot of times you have to kind of put the teacher hat on a little bit and kind of show them, what's currently happening around them, what's some best practices that are happening in other areas, just small changes that they can make within their organization that make a pretty big impact. We're currently working with some thought leaders within ENT to share what they're doing, some of the clinical data that they found to be impactful to their practice and their patients. So I think it's trying to work with them very closely, providing resources that can help educate their patients, not just on our procedure, but current things that they're doing to keep their office safe and their patients safe from COVID. So it's definitely some challenging times, but it also lends for the opportunity for us to be viewed as more of just their sales rep.
You're spot on.
Yep. And, you think about these things and they all actually relate back to someone doing something a little bit differently than they did before. They want more actionable ways for them to actually take something like this and put it into play. And that's why what we've put together is something called the Behavior Change Blueprint. So for our listeners, you can go to medicalsalesaccelerator.com and be able to download the Behavior Change Blueprint. It's simple, actionable steps that you can take. You print it out, you bring it to your next customer meeting, pick one that makes sense for the scenario you're in. Are you dealing with a customer where you're not really sure where they stand? Are you dealing with a dabbler and you just need to get them to take the next step? And there's some other scenarios on there. Actionable, easy things for you to implement immediately that you will see outcome from the Behavior Change Blueprint at medicalsalesaccelerator.com.
There's things that we've learned from MedTech professionals we've worked with and that we brought from other industries as well inside our own building.
I think the traditional sales style, is something that's becoming or is going to become obsolete over time, right? It's really also depending on the technology that you have. Looking back in my career, there are times that, I don't think the technology was very disruptive or there wasn't a paradigm shift. And if there's not a paradigm shift, it kind of makes it hard to implement this style. A lot of people that, we work with currently, and especially people I worked with in previous roles and in some of the other companies, that it's not beaten to their head. They're kind of afraid to talk about this a lot of times because they're just not used to it. It's not that it's rocket science. And until you really sit down and show them the impact that it can make on their territory or their career, that's when they tend to lend an ear and start calling people and asking some people who maybe within the organization that have taken advantage of this approach and start to figure out a way to implement that into their own, sales style.
You've mentioned several things that I've absolutely witnessed myself. You mentioned the deepest relationships you have been fostered out of customers where you were able to implement this offense and really drive value for not just them within a case in the clinical and technical side of a technology, but also the business that they're running. Another aspect that you mentioned had to do with commodity type selling situations or less disruptive type situations. And you might almost argue that it's more important if you're in more of a commoditized space at times, because you have less tech or features and benefits to distinguish yourself from your competitors. I'd love your take on that, but it feels like it's got some value there as well.
Yeah, I mean, after a while, and depending on, where the adoption curve is with a particular product, a widget, ultimately becomes a widget in the minds of a lot of physicians, right? It's inevitable, but if you can provide value, I think it can create some loyalty with that customer and help you win a lot of accounts and a lot of sales by thinking just a little bit differently. Maybe next time you go meet with the physician, as opposed to presenting a clinical study that you may have referenced prior, think about showing them a case study of something that was done in a different market in ways they were actually able to increase their utilization by just doing something simple, even if it's, making modifications to their current website or starting to, creative ways to engage your referring physicians in your area.
You also mentioned, Ben, a lot of peers in the space are maybe uncomfortable. They've just never run, practice development and value-based selling, if you will, as an offense themselves. They haven't been taught it within their organizations. They weren't connected with peers that had experienced the benefits of it. Certainly, with one of the organizations I've worked at in the past, the leadership team recognized that early on because of the need of that particular widget, right? And really made a shift in their hiring patterns more towards folks that had less traditional device experience and more of a business to business background. And it really helped those individuals grasp that conceptual sell.
Yeah, if I'm gonna spend a lot of time and provide, the level of engagement that I need and feel like they deserve. I think for me, you can only do this with a couple of accounts a quarter. I think once you get a physician's practice really motivated to market themselves to their patients, you have to motivate these people internally in an office too, because a lot of times they're your champions while you're gone. So you can spend time with them, show them why it's important, make them feel part of the team, make them feel part of the big picture. And then I think, my experience, I see them getting excited about whatever procedure you're talking about. And everybody's kind of echoing the same talk tracks that you're saying with them. And, all the way up to the physician, some of the talk tracks you're working with the physician on. Once you see them kind of regurgitating that to a patient, no matter who that person is in the office, it feels like you've done your job, right? And, you're spending a lot of time with a few accounts, and always focusing on that next level. What's the next market you want to go in? How far from this current market can you go out and reach another physician and potentially influence a whole nother group of patients and a whole nother group of doctors? So
that's a refreshing outlook for sure.
Yeah, it's the smaller the company you work for, especially like Clark working for startups, that it's all about growth. I mean, the growth expectation does not go away. And you're only going to get so much out of a certain practice if you just deal with their current customer base.
Yep.
So you have to figure out ways to get patients to these practices.
What you talked about is bringing employees in the practice in to be part of the team. And one of this is going pure neuroscience, but one of the challenges with employees in a medical practice is they are always about to run off the rails, right? They're handling everything. It's grind, days over. Grind, days over. That employee, a lot of times, isn't managed or measured in a way that drives value for them. It's hard for them to know that they had a good day at work or not. They just go home exhausted. You actually bring in this thing that they get to wrap their head around, and they get to say, my existence matters. And from a neuroscience standpoint, that's how you get awesome employees, is them knowing that what they do matters. So you delivering it to them not only drives your business, but actually takes an employee of one of your customers and makes them a better employee, makes them a better mom or dad when they go home too, because they actually will feel like their life has more value or importance because they got to put their flag into something, say, yep, I did this. So that's deep, and people don't realize how powerful that little shift is for the practice.
Yeah, because it's funny. Initially, whenever you bring something new to a practice, the physician may be excited, but the staff's always going to be dreading something new,
Yep.
something new they have to learn. And so I think initially you kind of get, some ugly looks. But if you are able to implement this new procedure, these new marketing strategies in the most turnkey way and simplified for them, it's always perceived so much better, right? And that's our job, is to make these resources and now procedures as turnkey and easy to use as possible for them. Whether if it's even, going as far as creating, talk tracks, like here's a Q&A sheet of, the 10 most frequently asked questions that you may see on this new procedure that you're offering, just so they can feel educated just enough to be dangerous, to keep that patient motivated each step along the way to schedule a visit, and then potentially meet the physician to schedule a procedure. So,
individual that's had a lot of impact on my career, definitely was a mentor within the sales force for one of my stops. One of the things that this gentleman used to push us as an organization on was pushing the clinical, the strategic, and the economic value of whatever we were discussing, right? And it sounds like you're really speaking that same language. You're looking at all three aspects and how it's going to not just drive good patient outcomes and not just drive patient efficiency with whatever that might be, right? The clinical efficacy obviously has to be there, but also the strategic value that it brings that practitioner and that business within any given geography, as well as the economic benefits or challenges that you're having to overcome as a sales professional.
Yeah, it's I like to keep it pretty simple, and when I'm interviewing or as I'm talking to reps, kind of keeping it to that same similar 3-step approach. Always start with clinical, showing people why it works, how it works, the impacts it has on its patients, showing them the economic value it's going to bring to their practice, showing them with their local payers of what this means, how to bill it. And then, the final step is, once you have clinical and economic buy-in, is, how can they build this practice around this procedure? I think if you keep it simple, if you keep it to those 3 steps, I think you can see a lot of success.
Am I wrong in thinking that you view this as driving the value from a consultative perspective versus walking in, trying to build that relationship up front and then driving value on the back end?
It's all about the halo effect and the holistic approach that happens. Whenever you offer this type of stuff, not only am I motivating new patients to come in to see these physicians, but you're also keeping your product top of mind with that individual practitioner, because there's so much technology that these physicians are getting introduced to every couple months. Everybody's figuring out, less invasive ways to do similar procedures that they've done the last 20 years. It's a good way to keep your product fresh in their minds and top of mind, so that you can expect to consistently see growth and not see those big major dips. When a physician may say, well, I've gone through all my patients that suffer with this disease state. You can find what vendor partnerships and relationships to form. I think you'll be surprised on the amount of growth you can see over a significant amount of time. And I know you saw that in your previous roles and what I observed, in your body of work, and hopefully we can do the same over here.
Yeah, without a doubt. I feel like that's going to be that much more impactful these days. All have to separate ourselves, right? And it's so much more than the box that shows up when somebody places an order. With what we see happening and all of the MedTech professionals we're working with across the country at this point, it's almost imperative that everybody's up in their skill sets, up in the way that they're approaching their business. 10 years ago, I may have been the only sales rep outside of folks in the pharmaceutical industry calling within that office. And then over the course of a 4, 5, 6 year period, and within the ENT specialties specifically at that time, there was a lot of other people grabbing for that attention from device companies. I only see that increasing and more procedures shifting post-COVID, specifically out of the acute care facilities, payments are driving things, efficiencies are driving things more and more towards ASCs. That's becoming more crowded. Not that it wasn't crowded already, but you've got a lot of ortho moving into that space as well, which was somewhat more traditionally in those acute spaces. The time that you can get within a facility in front of any particular decision maker has been condensed. And so separating yourself so that they will see you again appears to be more critical than it even was in the past.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think these fundamentals that we've been discussing throughout this podcast, I think that's what enables physicians to kind of get out their comfort zone a little bit and to start thinking, and looking what's going on around them, right? What do they have to do to prepare themselves for all the changes that are currently happening? Everyone, it seems like from a private practice physician, everybody's focusing on how to become more efficient and how to implement more procedures in the office setting. And so it really allows for a great opportunity for med device reps to partner with that physician in that practice to help, streamline or implement the changes that they're going through and be a resource, and make your procedure and your product something that they consider to be one of the focus areas of their practice.
Ben, I really appreciate you taking the time. We've covered a lot of awesome stuff. I think people out there, ask yourself, maybe just ask yourself this question: how much value do I bring to my customers? If someone was going up against me, do they have a wall built around the customer I'm trying to get to? And am I doing everything in my power to be able to drive that value deeper than just what the widget is? I think it's a nice self-check. And also visit medicalsalesaccelerator.com. You can enter your email address and download the behavior change blueprint, some quick, easy, implement right now type tools for you to change the conversations you have with your customers. Also sign up for our newsletter. Why? Find out about upcoming guests and other tips and tricks that will only go to our newsletter group. And finally, you can make suggestions about who you might want to see or hear on the show. And please review this and give us lots of fun stars so people see how much value people like Ben Bourterie bring to this industry, this community in the MedTech space.
If you found this valuable at all throughout this discussion, any nuggets of gold, pass it on to your friends, pass it on to your colleagues, share it with your teams. This community, it has to bond together so that we push each other forward, because at the end of the day, when we're better, more patients' lives are getting affected in a positive manner.